This is Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Juana Bordas. Now, Dr. Juana Bordas came to the U.S. in a banana boat from Nicaragua, when she was only 3 years old. She exemplifies the many contributions, the resiliency, and the determination of the immigrant spirit. She's been a woman's pioneer, designing and leading women's programs and several national Latina leadership organizations. Dr. Juana Bordas is recognized as an elder and icon in the world of leadership, diversity, and the advancement of Latinos and communities of color. She received the prestigious International Leadership Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. With over 50 years of experience as a leader, a teacher, an activist, and author, Dr. Bordas continues sharing her wisdom and insights with people across the globe. She's also a best-selling author, and we'll hear a little bit about her books. So welcome, Juana.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here today.
Juana, you work across many sectors of the economy. What do you find is the common thread in the need to create culture of equality and inclusion?
Well, that is a great question. I think, first of all, we have to realize that we are living in the multicultural age, that half of our children under 18 already identify as mixed or multicultural, and that Latinos are a mixed community. So what I see across the board is that people are struggling or want to know or want to engage in diversity and inclusion. They know that change is coming. And they can see it when they go to the 7-Eleven, when they have coworkers, when they hire somebody to take care of their children or fix their homes. They know it when they look at a diverse classroom in one of our universities. So what I'm seeing across the board, and I've done work with the corporate sector who is looking at the market has changed as well. Whether you're looking at government that has to serve all of our communities, whether you're looking at education that needs to educate this multicultural generation that's coming, or whether you're looking at the nonprofit sector that wants to create more equality and opportunity, we all know that change is coming and that diversity and inclusion is one of the hallmarks and one of the opportunities of this century.
And yet it seems like in many sectors, they're almost not acknowledging it. And it's like, how can you not when you just simply look around you?
Well, I think the way it has been framed in the past, and that's one of the things I want to do, is to restructure and reframe what it means to become a diverse community. The way it's been promoted in many ways, people don't understand that it's an add-on process. Nobody's asking anyone to give anything up. Yes, you have to do some healing, and you may have to look at some of the privilege, if you've had privilege and what that means, and acknowledge that. But it has to do, like I say, it doesn't have to do with color or race or ethnicity or age. Do you really believe and do you really want to create a society where everyone can reach their potential? Do you want to be part of the future? If you're a leader, you want to be part of the future, and the future's coming, the future's here. And that's what it's about. And it's about making the table wider. And it's honoring, accepting, and celebrating the gifts that diversity brings. So I use an asset-based approach. And by the time I'm through, people are going, I want some of that.
I'll have some of what she's having.
Some of that. Pass me a taco. I'm ready. And today, by the way, is Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
So people don't even know it, but they're celebrating diversity today as they eat their tacos.
I wonder if it also comes back to economics. I mean, that's what people say, the economic stratus. We've got to make a difference in getting more equality in the economic area for diversity.
Yeah, well, I did a lot of studies on money, and once you reach a certain level of security and comfort, more money doesn't really make you more happy. I go, more money, more happiness? No. What makes you happy is people, relationships, your family, community. It's making a contribution. It's reaching your own potential and learning. You know how much growth is a positive thing. And so when I look at the economic chasm, is that how you say it in English? Chasm that we have in America today, where 3 men own half the wealth. And in my community, 47% of Latinos, even though we have the highest participation, we love to work, we have the highest participation in the workforce. We're going to be 78% of the new entries into the labor market in the next 10 years. 47% of Latinos make under $15 an hour. Now, do we really want to live in a society that has that kind of gap in wealth? And we're not saying to anyone, don't enjoy a good life. But we really do need to look at the distribution of wealth in our society today, because I grew up in the 40s and 50s, and working class people could own a home and had a decent wage, and our wages have not kept in pace with the cost of living. And so I think those kind of things. And another thing is, how can we allow our children to start their lives? The millennials and Zs are going to be the most educated generation, but they're starting their lives with like $30,000 in debt if they go to college. So I believe that we want to create a different kind of community, and we want to go back to some of our founding values. And in my writing, I think that people of color, and particularly Latinos, can revitalize the American dream.
Yeah, I think they definitely could if they are allowed to, in a way, get out of their debt, whether it's from college or whatever, but often that's what it is. Be able to buy a house maybe, but today it's pretty hard to do something like that. It's how do you get up and out, A, and B, the B question might be, why are people that are resistant, why are they? Is it fear? Are they fearing people that might look different than them? Or what is it, do you think?
Well, I've been a community organizer all my life. I mean, I think if any of us that are into social change or social good or social benefit, as I call it, know that it's hard to do. One of the reasons I think that leadership in communities of color, it's such a model for our society, is because for generations, for centuries, we have had to motivate people to do the hard work of community change when they knew they would not see it in their lifetime. They would not see the benefits of their effort in their lifetime, where they had to work like my mother did, scrubbing floors, washing dishes. They've had to work at very hard jobs, and yet at the same time participate in how do I make how do I make life better for my children? And that's really, to me, what leadership is. Leadership is not only looking in the future, but it's how can I make the future better for those that come after me, that sense of legacy, that sense of contribution. So I think, that today people are pretty overwhelmed. I would say that, our society has so many issues. I want to just take one. We know that today, that more children die of gun violence than any other cause. And so do we really want to live in a society where our children are afraid to go to school, to go to a restaurant, to go to a theater? This has happened in churches. And so I say it's time for a new wave in America today. We need to get back to our values. Now, I was reading something the other day about how our government is kind of stuck because of the lobbying and because of the special interest and because, I always say we have the best government money can buy. Do we really want to do that? And so I'm a wake-up call in a sense. I'm saying to people, what do you want to leave your grandchildren?
Climate change? What do you want to leave them?
Exactly.
Now
young people
about how we get rid of garbage. I mean, there's so many things that if we're going to really think about getting back to real values of family, values of integrity, values of common sense. You know, it doesn't seem like we're heading in that direction, does it, to you?
Well, again, I'm a community organizer. And one of the main rules of a community organizer is play to your base, right? And so my base right now, even though I work with different sectors, is the younger generation. I just came back from Texas A&M where I spoke to 150 students. And here's why. In 13 years, millennials and Zs will be half the electorate. Half the electorate. And it's an activist generation because they know when you mention climate change, you know, they have eco anxiety. There's actually, you know, they're actually afraid of the future. And so there is this young movement today. I think we saw it in the last elections where so many young people are now being elected to Congress. And we need to do that. We need to bring in, let me just say this. When I was 19 years old, I saw John F. Kennedy. I was in college. And John F. Kennedy said, let the word go out from this time and place that the torch is being passed to a new generation of leaders. Well, that's where we are today. 10,000 baby boomers retire every day. The millennials and Z's largest generation in history. Are we going to do this? Are we going to help our young people? Are we going to help them have a better future? And the reason I say it's a wake-up call is, yes, you know, people are stressed today. And, you know, we now have a materialistic society rather than a community society. We used to have, you know, I didn't spend my Saturday afternoons at the mall. You know, that just didn't exist in our generation. And so I say, you know, it's time to wake up. It's time for us to look at our children and our grandchildren and say, we want to pass the torch and we want to help you change this. So as a community organizer, I cannot get depressed about, you know, for example, you know, the conservative Latinos in Florida. I have to say, young Latinos, young people, people in universities, women of goodwill, people of goodwill, people in our generation that don't want to retire but want to help. We need to encourage that because, you know, social change comes with only 25% of motivated people in a system. And, you know, the media keeps playing to this. Oh, no, we're going to say there's change coming. We want to be part of that change and we're going to transform America.
I say that's great.
Hallelujah.
I'm right there with you. With a Lifetime Achievement Award, you must have worked in the DEI space for many years. How do you think DEI really has evolved in today's culture and maybe why?
Well, it's one of the reasons I'm so hopeful is that you have to realize that when I entered the University of Florida, the first in my whole lineage to become educated, I never met another Latino or Latina. And this is 1960. And I marched my junior year. That was my first activist act, was to march to integrate the University of Florida. And 2 African Americans came on campus my senior year. So one thing that older people, or I should say seasoned people, or elders, because elders are respected in many communities, we have perspective. We know that change takes time. Women have had the vote 100 years, and we're just getting to the place where we're going to have the influence that we need to have. And so the University of Florida now is a Hispanic serving organization, which means over 25% of the students are Latinos. And I had the honor of going and addressing the freshman class, which was 1,500 students. And I was the only one back then. So that's what has happened. Change has happened. We have brought in women. We have brought in civil rights. Now we need to complete the task of integrating our society. And the way you do it is to look at the assets and the potential and the positive that these communities are bringing to America. I mean, we're here to uplift, right? We're here to include everybody. Women are not here just for themselves. They're here for their children, their families, their communities, the nonprofits, the churches, all the things that we've done, education, schools. And so that's what makes me so hopeful is that the change that we've seen, there's always a backlash when there's change.
Always. We must be very close to the same age because I graduated from high school in 1960 and started college that year. So it sounds like we're just about the same age.
I think I'm older than you, Nan.
Well, I'm 80.
Oh, then we are the same age. When's your birthday?
August 14th.
You're 3 days.
A Leo.
I
See,
think
there's
we
the
were born
Leos.
3 days apart. We must have made an agreement way back in the stratosphere that we would come in together and be part of this wave.
Yeah,
How wonderful. We were born 3 days apart, girl.
and the minute I started talking with you this morning, I thought, there's a person I'd like to get to know better, because you could almost sense that camaraderie right away.
Well, and this is the thing. We've also transformed age. The boomers have transformed age. When you're looking at the transformations that happened now, a lot of things happened on our watch that we need to now correct, but we are transforming age. The lifespan doubled in the last century. And let me throw something in. The lifespan has been getting longer and longer, and that's not true for our children. The morbidity rate is lower. And I ask people that are listening to this to please think about, do we really want to leave that kind of legacy for our children?
Yeah, and the chaos that has been created with it. Now, many of the people that you said you work with are millennials and Gen Zs. And you said, in general, their perspective is differing from the older generations. Not totally, because you still see some of the things that are still very conservative over there with some groups. But in general, when you're looking out to that sea of those 1,000 people we talked about, do you find in general their perspective differs from the older generations, and how are you seeing it?
Well, I'm so happy you brought this up, because my new book, The Power of Latino Leadership Ahora, has a whole chapter on intergenerational leadership. And of course, I interviewed leaders. So you remember, leaders are thinking about the future. And so they're digital activists. That's one change. I interviewed Cristina Jimenez, who helped bring DACA about. And for those of you that don't know DACA, it's the dreamers.
Yeah.
And by the way they framed it is they said, we are all dreamers. And that's what diversity is about. We are all Latinos. I have a whole thing on Latino by Corazon and how you can join with us. And so what they were telling me, that when they were doing DACA, which was to try to protect people like me, I was lucky because in the 40s you could become a citizen, right? But here are all these children who have grown up here who are not citizens. They had 5 million people a month on their website. And when you look at the climate change march, 130 countries. When you look at gun violence, so young people today not only are digital activists, but they understand systemic racism, systemic institutions. They understand that problems are global. The economic situation that we have is global, right? Because things can be made in China cheaper, or whatever the dynamic is. And so they have a global perspective. They also have something that we have done. It's called an insider-outsider approach. You have to realize that the new wave of Latinos that were elected to Congress, the majority of them were millennials and Zs, because we got a Z elected, the first Z elected, Maxwell Frost, whose issue is gun violence. And they all know gun violence is. So they're a lot smarter than we were at their age. I have a millennial daughter. She was on a computer at 3. And so they look at change different than we do. They're also much more accepting of differences. They have a thing called intersectionality. And they believe that we should tell our stories to each other, because we've come from especially the immigrant kids have come from so many different countries, they don't know each other. So they want us to be authentic, to share our stories. And so, yes, I think young people have a different way of leading, but I think many of them feel that this is a crisis for them and they're not sure about the future. And so I think they have a lot to add. And when I say they have an insider-outsider approach, they're now going into Congress are activists. They're going into Congress, going into organizations, but at the same time, they want movement politics. They want, people to stand up. They want, think of the Women's March, for example, across the world. So they want people to stand up. So it's an insider-outsider approach. And if you're more comfortable working within the system, you work within the system. If you're more comfortable being part of a movement, you're part of a movement. And I want to say, by the way, in my own life, it's a great opportunity to meet people, to feel like you're doing something for the future, to exhibit your own power, it's just a great feeling to be part of a social change movement.
Tell us a little bit more about the books you've written.
Well, great. So glad you asked. My first book was called Salsa, Soul, and Spirit, Leadership for a Multicultural Age. And I want to tell you that it was the white male leaders who encouraged me to speak. To write. That's why I say that diversity is not about color, race, ethnicity, age. It's about, do you really believe that every human being has potential, and that by bringing people that are different together, you create synergy, you create, energy, you exchange ideas, you learn. And so I was part of this group called the Kellogg Scholars that the Kellogg Foundation put together. And some of the leadership greats were there, like James McGregor Burns, who wrote the book Leadership in the 70s, or Warren Bennis, or for those of you that study leadership, Bernie Bass, who did transformational leadership. And so I would argue with them about leadership, and they finally said to me, Juana, in our tradition, if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. See, I come from an oral tradition. And in addition to that, I'm the first generation that's literate, that's graduating from college in great numbers. Now, Latinos are the fastest growing group into universities and colleges. But in my generation, very few of us were educated like I was. And so that's why I started writing. And when I looked at the leadership field, there was no book on how communities of color, through so many years of colonization, of slavery, of marginalization, of being minorities, how did we get to where we are today? That's the question leaders should ask. Why are we a positive force for change in America? Why are we benefiting our society as much as we are? And so I started to look at the unique ways people of color lead. And I'll just say two things. One is the leader is equal, that all of us have leadership potential. And if you're going to create social change, or you're going to create a good organization, everybody has to be on board, right? Sharing that vision, working together, knowing how they contribute. The leader is equal. So I, as a leader, treat everybody with respect. And the person that cleans the place, the person that does the IT, the person that does the marketing, everybody's an essential person. So that's called the leader is equal. And if you do that, you create a second principle, which is leadership by the many. And that's where you get organizational change, and you get change in your society, you get change in a group, because everybody is participating. And so those are two things we can learn from community of color. In addition, the values that we bring, which are so important: hard work, generosity, collaboration. How did we get here? By working together, by supporting each other, by building community, by having respect for each other.
Yep, absolutely right. What do you feel kind of remains the outstanding problem that we're dealing with in today's society? And then, do you have any suggestions on how that can be resolved?
So you just want me to pick one name?
I want you to pick one.
Well,
or we'll be here for 3 hours, which we could be, and it'd be fun.
Okay, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to pick two.
Okay.
I think personally, it's materialism, for one thing. I live in the same house I've lived in for 42 years. And my mentor, Bernie Valdez, who was I live in Colorado. He was the Colorado statesman of the last century. I was going to go pick him up for lunch the first time. He was my mentor. I was in my 30s, and I drive up to, he's a Colorado statesman. So I expect, I drive up to this little house behind the Broncos Stadium. And so our leaders are, it's not about how much wealth you accumulate. It's what are the contributions you've made? Do people respect you? Are you, in my book, I call it personalismo. What kind of a person are you? And we know that leadership is about, preparing yourself. It's a great honor to lead people or to be part of a leadership team. And so you have to become the kind of person that people want to follow. And I think one of the most important things in our society today is this materialism, this gap between the rich and the poor. This people, I mean, I talk about generosity in my books, because if you're grateful and generous, if you're grateful for what you have, you're not always looking for more. And so I think we need to restructure materialism or capitalism to the point where if we're comfortable, if we have a nice life, let's figure out what we can do for others. And then the second one is participation, that we have got to renew our democracy. We need to get people involved. We need to get people talking to each other. We need to get people to understand that we are people of goodwill, regardless of what side of the aisle we're on. And we have to have a common vision. And that vision has to be, how do we make life better for the next generation? And how do we create a society that takes care of its people? That's my definition of leadership, by the way. Leadership is taking care of your people.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. You know, I tend to refer to it as AAM, all about me. And that's what it seems like is the problem. You know, we get so entrenched in, well, you know, will it benefit me? Well, what about me? And we do it to the exclusion then of everybody else. And I'm like, that is just plain selfish. Do you realize that?
Well, it may be selfish, but it also doesn't make you happy. My mother, my humble immigrant mother, who had the strength of steel, who had determination, who had vision. You know, when I was growing up, I was poor, I was an immigrant, I was Latina, I was a girl in the 40s and 50s. You know, I thought I was disadvantaged, only to find out I come from greatness. I come from a mother who had that vision. She had everything a leader has, you know. And if I would get down and out, my optimistic mother who believed in the future would say, get busy and do something for somebody else. And
that's the key.
That's servant leadership, by the way.
That's
the highest forms of leadership. But here's the other thing. If you spend too much time thinking about numero uno, it's not going to make you happy. Try it. Try it. Try thinking that, you know, if you just concentrate on yourself and who I am and all this, yes, you have to do your healing. Yes, you have to take care of yourself. You know, my friends that are my age say maintenance takes all this work because we got to stay healthy. But on the other hand, to really just focus on you will not make you happy. And when you build a community of supporters, when you give, I believe the Bible says you get seven times back. And it's true. Giving to others is something really, it's empowering yourself, because my cup runneth over. I can give because I'm full.
Well, that seems probably our biggest takeaway, isn't it? That very thing. Have you got anything else that you would like people to take away from our discussion?
Well, first of all, Nan, I want to thank you for your life of service. And second of all, yes, I want to thank the people that are listening, because those that are listening, they want to grow, they want to learn, you know, they're connected to leadership. And that's exactly what we need. And I hope, you know, esperanza, or hope. I was just looking at the stats. Latinos are the most optimistic people in America. 75% of us believe our life's going to get better. And from where I came from, the banana boat in a little house in Tampa, Florida, life is grand. And so thank you all so much for listening. Let's work together to create a kind of future that takes care of our children. And so thank you for listening. I'm very honored.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the program, but more than that, I appreciate just you being you. You know, we have to give all we can give. At 80, you know, we've seen a lot, we've done a lot, but there's so much more to do. And that's why we can't just sit back and say, oh, I've had my life. You know, we have to say, no, we may have another 20 years left. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, my mentor, Frances Hesselbein, who led the Girl Scouts and was an incredible thought leader and taught me so much. She did early work in diversity back in the 90s, right? Transforming the Girl Scouts. She died at 105. And continued writing and teaching till her last day. And so what a great opportunity now to be an elder, to have some wisdom, but also to learn from the next generation. And by the way, if you want to see how I learn from the next generation, check out my TikTok channel.
Okay, what's it called? Your name?
My name, Juana_Bordas, and I'm known as Tia Juana to the younger generation.
Thank
That
you.
I'm like their aunt. I'm a partner.
Yeah.
Because they want lateral relationships. They no longer want hierarchy or dominance. They want us all to work together. So young people teach us so much, don't they?
They do. Well, thank you so much. It's been so much fun talking to you.
Bezos. Thank you.
And buy her book so you really do find out what leadership.
Yeah, because I want to be the first Latina on the best-selling list for a nonfiction book. It's a serious book, but it's a book that'll really help you shape the future.
Thank you, Anna.
Adios.